Hello, everyone, and welcome to KOPE Life Nation. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited on this episode to have a very special guest today. And what I want you to understand is that this is a guest that I've been following for some time on social media. And so, one reason why I'm excited to have her on the show is because I'm a fan. I was a fan before we were friends. And one reason why I was a fan is because she's very intelligent. Simply put, she knows what she's talking about. She's a sports journalist. And let's be honest, when you think about your experts in sports, you think of men. That's what you do. And the reason why we do that is because we've been conditioned to do that. But what happens when you think about men being the experts, sometimes we allow ourselves to trick ourselves into thinking that other people, as in women, can't be experts. And what we have to do is we have to be aware of our stereotypes. We have to be aware of our biases. Because if we're aware of our biases, we're aware of the negativity that we bring, then we can choose to get out of the way and let people like my next guest shine. I'm talking about Tanya Ray Fox, and she's absolutely amazing. And she's amazing for a couple different main reasons. Reason number one is because of her sports expertise. I absolutely love it. I love her content on TikTok and Instagram. And I've seen her on YouTube as well, on different podcasts. But I also love, and this is more important, I love the way that she handles the haters, the people who think that they know more about sports than her just because she's a woman. And I can tell you they're completely wrong. And I'm excited to share her wisdom and knowledge with you. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my special guest, Tanya Ray Fox. Hey, Tanya, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Charleston?
I am so good. I'm so excited that you're here to talk about this. I have a lot of friends, a lot of women who are friends of mine who love sports. And it's always the same thing. They can't even be fans of certain teams without someone saying, "Oh, was your husband a fan first?" Right? They're not allowed to just love sports. So, what I really want to get into right off the top is I want to talk about, or I want you to talk about, just really your love of sports and why you do this.
Yeah, I think I probably do it for the same reason anyone does it, right? It's usually a combination of being a sports fan at some point in your youth or finding that like lane of interest and combining it with a desire to be in media in some capacity, like everybody who covers sports and is in sports journalism or is in sports media is there's some point in that journey where they decide, is my journalism going to have like a broad news angle? Am I going to be a political journalist? Am I going to be a sports journalist? Am I going to be an entertainment journalist? And sometimes those paths do cross and they cross over, but um, there's something very unique about choosing specifically to cover sports because number one, it is extremely hard to like make a living at. I mean, journalism is a difficult way to make a living anyway.
Yes.
But and there's also just like very it's a very like niche, group of people. It's there, sports are broad, but in terms of, pop culture crossover, when you're entering sports, you're doing it almost always. And I say this like with a lot of confidence because you love sports. Like everybody who's covering sports grew up a sports fan, grew up a fan of certain teams or certain like players or whatever else. And I think that makes sports a little bit unique in that way. And I was a fan. I was a sports fan. I played sports and I loved journalism and I loved writing and I loved the idea of being able to share that with other people. And by the time I got to college, I knew like I'm definitely doing journalism. I'm definitely doing communications. Like this is my lane. And the only thing I could think I wanted to do that with was sports. People would say, you'd be a great political writer. You'd be a great. I was like, it does not bring me joy. that like I'm Marie Kondoing that out of my life. It just does not bring me joy. And that's just it just sort of felt inevitable. Like I don't know that I ever genuinely considered as an adult with a real like adult sort of mindset about what I was going to do with my life, that it was ever going to be anything else.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's for me. It's so raw where you're just like, I love these things, and so nothing else matters. Politics matters, of course. Global affairs, lots of things matter. But what you said specifically was, this brings me joy. There are lots of things you could have done to make more money or whatever, but this brings you joy. And I love that you said that. So many people, even getting into college, when they think about what do they want to do with their career and they prioritize their options, joy isn't a part of the equation. So my next question for you, another thing that you said is that you love sports. So what I want you to kind of do for me is talk about the difference between, and we can compare you and me.
Okay.
I love following the Carolina Panthers. I'm a fan of the Panthers. How is that different than loving sports?
Yeah. It might not be, in some ways it might just be a little microcosmic version of loving sports, right? Like I don't think that it makes you less of a fan, or a different kind of fan. I think it's just, when I say I love sports, right? It is of course blossoms from growing up and wearing my little, Bruins jacket and getting to do Fenway, opening day at school, and a blossoming love for specific teams, like you loving the Panthers. But as I grew into it, the thing that made me feel like I love sports and not just a team, and what makes it different maybe for someone who's covering sports as for a living, is that like every aspect of the process of enjoying sports, how it's perceived, those angles I'm thinking about every single day. So, when you watch a Panthers game and you listen to the Panthers guys on radio and you make sure you know all the stats, the best, who are they drafting, everything else. At me as a New England fan, I'm almost, if I could have infinite amounts of information in my brain, I'd want to know everything about the Panthers too. And I'd want to know everything about the Seahawks and the Rams. If I could fit all of that into my brain at the same time, I would do that. I would do that with every single team in every single sport. I've been in every many angles of sports media. My journey has put me in a very unique position. So I use my own jobs as a way to explain this a lot of times. So like I started out as an assignment editor in a newsroom, and that was the angle of how we get everybody where they need to be to cover the teams, right? And so I was constantly seeing that angle of things. And then part of that was production assistant work, going on set and being in locker rooms and learning, oh my God, I love learning about what's going on behind the scenes and in locker rooms and with these players. And then I moved on and I was an NFL researcher and learning about the stats, how to find them, how you're able to curate interesting topics and stories and conversational, pieces based on statistics that you can find, and how you are able to kind of dig into that to create larger meta narratives. And then I become what I really want to do as a sports writer and creating those topics that people want to really like dig themselves into. And I end up back in sports TV, in a production role. And all of those things encompass what makes, I think, a love of sports itself a little bit different than just, hey, like I enjoy this team, which is just like every single bit of information that you take in every day, how you learn about that team is what I'm passionate about. I want, even if you only care about one team or one player, for you to feel that ultimate feeling of like, hey, this is the information that I want. These are the things I want to hear about. These are the things I want to talk about. And I want you to feel as included as somebody who sits down and looks at every single stat every single day about every single team. That to me is such a beautiful thing, to have a Panthers fan find me on Twitter because maybe I was tweeting about Cam Newton, because that's something specific that we connected on. That's the beautiful thing, is I'm
Yes.
trying to branch out and reach so many people through that like broad, huge space I have in my life for sports.
I love it. I love it. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. A love for sports because for me, when it comes to sports, I'll put it like this. I see all of your content, right? As much as we can be friends, I'm still a fan of yours. So I'm a fan of your content. And I see you post and talk about things like baseball, not really interested in. And you said Fenway earlier. I know you're all about that.
Yeah.
And then the Boston Bruins. I liked hockey for about a couple years, a long time ago, when the Hurricanes were decent. I
Yeah.
don't even remember how many years ago that was. And so for me, I can be honest with myself and say, even with the NFL, there's a lot of things that don't interest me. And you mentioned baseball and hockey, and then I see a lot of your basketball content, and I see with your basketball content people, and you can speak on this a little bit too, people seem unable to be objective about what they're looking at. And so why don't you
Yeah.
talk about trying to be objective with people on social media who are just mad at you?
Well, I think we place a lot of importance on objectivity, right? I think that we're living in like a much better, more equal time in terms of sports media and the ability to admit that we all have biases. Because we all grew up as fans, it is impossible to completely extricate yourself from what it feels like to be a fan. If you claim that you have no biases, that you have no ties to any of your childhood teams or whatever else, you either don't have the passion for sports that you once did, or you're lying. So objectivity is a little bit of a, it's not exactly what you think it is. It's not that I can't, behind the scenes, I am not objective. When I am watching the team and there's a stupid foul, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay. Tonight Giannis can just charge everybody and blah blah blah. I do the same thing that everybody else does in their living room. But when I get on Twitter, there is a part that I've been able to compartmentalize in my brain where I'm like, listen, because I've worked on different coasts, I've worked for different teams. I've worked covering the Rams, I've worked covering the Los Angeles Lakers. I've worked outside of my little niche. I am able to see a little bit outside of the bubble of whatever market or whatever little, niche interest that these fans have. So a lot of Celtics fans, kind of like you are kind of just, you're a strong Panthers fan. A lot of Celtics fans are just Celtics fans. They
Yes.
just like basketball and they just like the Celtics. And if they do like beyond that, it's a lot of just like, I'm an NBA guy, right? There you cannot replicate as a fan, no matter how hard you try, the experience of having to go in every single day into a studio and watch the like 18 win Lakers in that like that's the season I cover. I cover the worst Lakers season in like the history of I had to watch them every single day. I had to watch this team, right? You can't replicate what it's like to watch the like 7-9, Jeff Fisher Rams and have to cover them every single day. The same, those kinds of experiences create an ability to separate yourself from the fan perspective and see the what's unfolding as just in a sports context. And then you start to realize, okay, these are the tools I use when I have to be more objective about my own teams. So when I was able to see clearly what was going wrong with the Chargers that one season, when I was able to see clearly what was going on with, the Lakers this one season or the Clippers or whatever else, I have to be able to do that with the Celtics too. And I think that's where like things break down, because I don't blame fans of teams for not being objective, but they also overestimate their ability to have an honest conversation about it, because they've never been in a spot to have to. Like nobody has tools for a job they don't do. I don't
Right.
expect fans to be objective. I expect that if I'm being objective as objective as I can be as a sports journalist, that you hear it out, take it in, maybe you agree, maybe you don't. But I think that sometimes people get their wires crossed where they're like, "Oh, well, you think you know everything, blah blah blah," and it's like, what I think is that I have, over the course of the last 12, 13 years of my life, developed skill sets and tools in my day-to-day life doing this, that a person who's just a fan, who has another job, who has other obligations, who has other things going on in their life, who hasn't moved across the country and worked in several fucking markets, that, that I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to tell you, I don't know if you know this or if I've told you this before, but people who are watching can leave comments. And so here's a comment for you from someone who's watching.
Try being a
Yeah,
Cowboys fan.
I'll pass on that. I'll pass on being a
I'm
Cowboys fan.
good. Yeah, all set. I will say, I've said this before. I'm a Patriots fan, so I feel like I'm about to feel like what it's like to be a Cowboys fan, because the Cowboys had their little like journey in the 90s where they were the greatest thing in the world. And now the Patriots are way better. Their dynasty was much longer. However, they're entering the dark years. So I'm about to experience what it's like to be a Cowboys fan.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this. Since the first football game I ever watched was it was during the Joe Montana 1981 season, right? This is dedicated to everyone who doesn't know that I'm coming up on 50. But since I started watching football, and I don't remember everything from elementary school, I will say this: I don't remember the Patriots losing 15 games in a row and having the first overall pick like my Panthers have done.
I don't
So,
think they did that. They've had some
yeah,
dark years, but I don't know, at least not in our lifetimes, I don't think.
right. So I think you're doing okay.
Yeah, no, I have no complaints.
But one thing that you talk about though is your love for sports, but then in addition to that, so many of us have a love for sports, and really, I think as you grow up and you get into different things like family, having a job or whatever, you pay less attention to sports and you pay less attention to real life or what's important for you. But you've managed to keep it together. And when I say that, I mean not just your love for sports, but your love for journalism and writing. And so I guess for me, at what point did you come to the realization? Well, two questions for you. First of all, as you're working your way through college and as you're feeling like this is what I want to do, were there times where you really doubted your ability to do it? And then as you transitioned into this career, were there times where you felt like, I can't believe I'm here? Like, wow, look at me, I'm doing it.
Yeah. I think that, the doubts never creeped in terms of like, will I be able to do it? I think the only doubts that came through were like, how am I going to do this? Like, what's going to be my in? Cause this
Yes.
is hard. And there's always lucky breaks, and luck is a huge part of being successful in this business. Privilege is a huge part of being successful in this business. And I am like I'm a white woman. So a lot of that privilege factors into why I didn't have a ton of doubts that I'd be able to make it in. Now, I do have sexism and misogyny to deal with, but let's not lie. Like, being a white woman in Massachusetts did not make it, that made things a little bit easier for me. And as I look back on it, I realized I probably should have had more doubts that this would work out for me. But I had that privilege and that confidence in myself. It's not the worst thing to have confidence, but it is something that I always try to acknowledge now, because it's not so easy as just believing in yourself. You have to have privilege, you have to have luck, you have to have all these other things on your side outside of like hard, determination to do what you're doing. And there have been, I have to say, like dozens of times, and they still happen to this day, that I think, I cannot believe I do this. I cannot believe this is happening. I cannot believe that I'm here doing this. And I told the story on TikTok about like my first maybe week of interning and my first job in all of sports, being asked by one of the anchors who ended up becoming my good friend to go get dinner from Chili's for Tommy Heinsohn. And I was like, I kind of looked at him and he was like, I know, I'm sorry, but like, we need someone to go grab. And I was like, are you saying sorry? Are you apologizing to me that I get to go do this? Like, I thought it was the greatest honor of my life to go pick up. This man has like 11 rings, like 10 rings, something. I'm good. Like where do I go? You know, I was ready. And from there, it's only been, I mean, just dozens of times where I have felt that way. And just that's how I knew I was in the right space, because I was like, are there people who would complain about this? Because I would never complain about this. I'm so happy. And yeah, there's been several times over the years I've felt that way. And if and when I stop feeling that way, I think it'll be a bad sign, or a sign that I need to move on. And it has not happened yet.
I love it. I love it. There's so many things that you said that I really love, and you mentioning gratitude and appreciation. You also talked about privilege, and being a white woman and having privilege. However, being a white woman hasn't always given privilege in sports, and so I want to give you a minute to talk about maybe who did this before you that maybe inspired you, gave you hope, maybe who you think is a pioneer that kind of helped you see yourself in this light.
Yeah. I mean, obviously growing up, I was born in the 80s, grew up as a child in the 90s, was in high school age in the early 2000s. So not a ton of options. However,
Right.
there are two that stick out to me, and they're really, really formative to me. One is obviously Robin Roberts, and her being like really like a really key figure to my childhood, just in terms of seeing a woman in that space on television. And then more close to home was Jackie McMullen, and I got to like work with her in Boston, and she became a little bit of a mentor while I was there. And to me, Jackie McMullen was the peak of sports and what you could achieve. And she really, I mean, truly, as a writer, and her accomplishments, they're huge. She always felt a little more accessible to me just because she was local. She was like she was covering Boston sports, and Robin Roberts was this ESPN like icon. And I was like, well, I don't know. That's the dream, right? That's the dream. And
Right.
media's changed now, so it's a little different. But Jackie was so close to home, and she was a Boston woman, and she covered the Celtics, and there's just so much there. And so those two women stick out to me specifically. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I love that because I know that, and really anyone that watches sports knows that there was a time where women weren't really a part of this at all. And then we would see women, and for me, I think at first it was women on the sidelines during NFL games. But then you see women in the studio, and I've recently heard, and I love this on Sirius XM radio. I think it was ESPN, might have been Fox Sports, a couple of shows where it's two or three women and there are no men. And what
Mm-hmm.
are they doing? They're doing the same thing men do, giving expert
Yeah.
analysis. Like that's
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Arguing
They're
with each
talking
other,
sports.
doing all the same things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I love it. I think it's so beautiful. And we know that it's a journey. And so what I'm wondering about for your journey is maybe how you dealt with sexism or people kind of just brushing you off in the beginning. Because I'm assuming that there are lots of men who wanted to do what you're doing, and maybe they didn't get here because they didn't love the game, writing, or journalism as much as you. Right? Had nothing to do with intelligence. You just had that love. Um, but there are still men who are, and I see it all the time. I see it in your TikTok comments. Like what does
Yeah.
this woman know about sports? I just got
Yeah.
home from my day job, whatever they're doing, and you've been doing sports all day. So can we talk about a little bit about the sexism in the beginning of your journey and how you dealt with that?
Yeah. So I think I'm not sure I've ever made this super clear. And I think it's something that I've learned over the last like 4 or 5 years. But when you're first starting out, at least when I was right around, I think I started interning in 2010, my senior year of college, I didn't understand the internalized misogyny that I had in myself, right? Like you're raised in such a crazy environment that even as a kid, even as a little girl, knowing guys aren't talking to me about sports, they're being sexist, they're being rude, whatever. I still had so much to unpack for myself that it took me years to recognize all of the aggressions and microaggressions and harassments and the things that were happening to me that made me feel uncomfortable, but I attributed to culture, to the culture of working in sports, to the culture of a newsroom. like nobody gives you that playbook of things to look out for. This is what the sexism and the misogyny is going to look like. This is the way, like, this is how it's going to result in your paycheck. This is how hard you're going to have to fight for opportunities and promotions. Like, you just don't see it until you're in it. And then once you're in it, it can be you can get a lot of imposter syndrome, and you can get a lot of second guessing yourself. And that's why women who are veterans in the industry helping to talk about that is deeply important, because there just wasn't a lot of that when I was starting out. There still just wasn't a lot of that. And there were a few women that were so instrumental in helping me along, thank God, and men as well. But like, it just took me a while to really wrap my arms around what the sexism and misogyny really looked like beyond the obvious stuff. Everybody thinks it's like you walk into the newsroom and everyone's like, "What's up, sugar butt?" Like, like they're yelling, it's like
Right.
it's not this obvious. I mean, sometimes it has been pretty bad, pretty outright, whatever, but that's the stuff that everybody around you recognizes and says, "Hey, that's not cool." It's all the insidious stuff underneath that has to do with your ability to like tone policing, and how, asking for raises when other people are getting promotions, like, and you're not, and looking for opportunities. There were so many times I had to fight for the same opportunities that I was watching other people get, like, I want to pursue my writing and I want to do this stuff. And I was being told I couldn't do it, but this, that guy could, and all these little things. And slowly but surely I developed enough experience to say, I can recognize when I'm not getting the right treatment. And I can never be in someone's mind and say, "You're a sexist, you're a misogynist, you're whatever." But I can say, we all have it built into us, because that's the society we live in. So if I have it in me, you have it in you. And I need to be able to differentiate when it's time for me to stand up for myself. And that's just experience. I didn't have it for the first few years, maybe the first like 5-6 years of my career, where I could fully and completely recognize when those things were working against me, even when I was fighting for myself, even when I was standing up for myself, even when I was saying this isn't right. I didn't quite have the courage or the knowledge to say outright, to call it out for what it was, which was internalized bias and sexism and misogyny. And as a society, we've gotten a lot better at talking about that across the board. That's enabled a lot of people. I'm sure younger women coming into the industry now are a little more emboldened than even I was. And hopefully in 10 years, it'll be the same, even more. But that's the thing that I want people to understand, is that like, it's not on you to step into the adult world, into a newsroom or into a production studio or whatever, and immediately recognize all the little microaggressions and behaviors that are working against you basically every single hour of your day. Like, it's going to take time, and and that is unfortunately a reality that like there's no escaping. Learning how those things affect you from college all the way through the rest of your career is a learning journey, especially for, I think, specifically for white women. Because like, for white women that grow up in the suburbs and have this illusion of equality, that when you end up in a place where you are much even more of a minority, the learning curve is even more. And so like, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, yeah, now I see what's happening here. And I think that it also opens up the door to be a lot more empathetic and a better ally for everybody else that's fighting the good fight in the industry as well.
Yeah, that's so powerful for you to talk about your internalized misogyny and just recognizing what's going on, because a lot of times the sexism or the misogyny looks like it's dressed up like it's here to help you. And I'll give you an example from my time in the military. I've had friends, women friends of mine, who were not even offered certain opportunities. And then they were asked, and when I say opportunities, I mean lots of people have the same career field in the military, and then there's an opportunity to deploy somewhere, maybe
Right.
to go downrange to the desert somewhere or to Europe, and they're not offered the opportunity. And then what happens is they're told, well, I didn't bring it up to you because you're married and you have a family.
Mhm.
And then the response is, well, don't these guys also have spouses and kids? Well, yeah, but that's different. And
Yeah.
so the person in charge of this opportunity thought they were helping. But the bottom line is, you're a wife and a mother. So I didn't think you would want it compared to this man who's a husband and a father. Well, they like those things. And so for you to recognize the internal misogyny is very important. And I say that because there are plenty of times in those situations where it's disguised as helping you, and then you agree with it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. You're gonna say,
No, you're 100% right. I said exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of times where where you think, you know, you're telling me that I'm the problem, I must be the problem. I'm 23, what do I know? Like there's also just a lot of that too. Just I don't have enough life experience to know that what you're telling me is BS. Um, that's another part of it too. And being taken advantage of as a young person in those spaces is also a big part of it. Um, a big part of being a young woman across the board in society, but especially in male dominated industries.
yeah, you say that, and you remind me, I don't know why, but what you just said reminded me of something that I saw a clip of Doris Burke not too long ago. And she was asked about moments that she's had covering the NBA. And she brought up how she was covering the 2016 NBA Finals. And she overheard in the huddle, game seven in the huddle, I think the coach was Tyronn Lue, asking LeBron James to do more. And she's thinking to herself, what more can he do? And in that moment, I was thinking, a lot of people don't understand, or they don't get, why is this woman able to be there, because they don't know her resume. They don't know the work that these women have put in to get where they are. So how do you deal with people who maybe, and this is more about the social media, people not understanding what you do, and how does it make you feel when people basically dismiss your opinion because you're a woman? And I'm asking you this because I've seen you respond to a lot of these people gracefully, with maybe a lot more kindness than I would have.
Well, that's taken practice. I also will lace into a hater, it depends on the mood I'm in. But I have found, depending on the way that something is phrased is usually how I will respond to it. And uh if I do give a graceful or a gracious response, it's usually because I feel like there may be an inkling that they can be reached in some capacity. And even if it doesn't reach them specifically, it might be helpful to someone else who sees it. The reality is it's taken a lot of work and effort and personal growth and battling imposter syndrome and everything else to get to a place where the sexist comments don't hurt me. I've already achieved so much in my industry now that it's sort of falling on deaf ears. What I don't want is for people who are in their earlier mid 20s still working to grind and find their way in the industry to see stuff like that and then see other women say, just don't listen to them. There's always going to be haters. Don't engage, because that to me is so harmful. So when I respond to those things, what I'm keeping in mind is not that I'm personally offended. I'm offended on behalf of every single time when I was 23 or 24 or 25 or 26 and young and just insecure that I read something like that and didn't know how to respond. I'm responding for the people who are like that right now, who are looking at this stuff and thinking, how many people think this about me? I'm responding for all of the men in the industry who don't stand up to trolls like that, or who don't stand up to people in the newsroom who are like that. I despise being told not to give that kind of stuff attention or to ignore it, because it's a reflection of reality. Is that specific person an anonymous troll? Yes. Are they speaking a reality that we've existed in since the beginning of time and certainly in all of media? Yes. So when I respond, the thing that it's coming from now and has come from on Twitter for a very long time as I've built a following there and on social media, on TikTok, whatever else, is that like I do not want anyone to ever look at me and say, well, she's achieved what she's achieved and she continues to grow and she's had her career. So now she's fine just like coasting. Like she's going to become part of the establishment. She's going to become part of the problem. She's going to be one of those people who defends the jerks on her own network, or she's going to be the person who defends, or ignores what other people are saying about women in this industry. She's going to be somebody who enables the sexism because she doesn't want to lose followers. Like I cannot tell you how many times I've stuck up for women, gone into political issues, whatever else on my platforms, and lost followers by the dozens because it's not popular. And I know that. And there's a strong reason why there's a lot of people that you can think of off the top of your head, man and woman, that you don't know where they stand in the social hierarchy. You don't really, I don't know where they stand politically. I don't think I understand what their views on, the Me Too movement were, or what Black Lives Matter, or any of these other things. That's not a part of their platform. They just want to be sports people. And people of color and women in the industry don't have that luxury of just getting to be sports people. And I will never be somebody who thinks that I deserve to just get to be a sports person. And I don't want anyone to think I do.
I love that you kind of getting me fired up a little bit. I love it. You say you say you hate being told to, don't worry about it, ignore it, and so on. And I love that you respond. I love that you don't tolerate that. Because when you say that, I think about just the idea that women and girls are supposed to be nice. And
Yeah.
is that an industry standard? I mean, does anyone tell Stephen A. Smith to just be nice? And so
Yeah.
and so that's not even about the industry. That's about your personal values and worth and your boundaries. And I love you speaking on setting an example for other people of how to enforce boundaries. And I love that. I could talk about boundaries all night.
Yeah.
And I know that you've had to really express your boundaries and just, and not tolerate stuff. I truly love that. What I want to do is I want to switch gears a little bit because one thing about women coming up in sports journalism is also the rise of women's sports. And I'm excited about it. And so this is my opinion, and I want to I want to get your opinion about my opinion.
Okay, great.
My opinion is that we are, after last season, we are more excited about women's college basketball this year than men's college basketball.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like, I don't even think it's a question. I don't even, and it's really crazy. That's watching that tournament go down was one of the craziest things I've ever seen as someone who's been a sports fan or covered sports. I've never seen women's sports domestically, like non Olympics or non-national team stuff, just like a domestic league, get that kind of attention. It was wild. It was really cool.
It really was. I love it. I like women's basketball more than men's basketball because there's more fundamentals, right? In men's basketball, especially the NBA, some guys are so talented it kind of doesn't matter what the coach says. You're just this
Yeah.
guy
Yeah.
is yeah. But for women, there's more fundamentals, and I like the fundamentals probably because I'm not the most athletic person, so I needed to do things fundamentally sound. I couldn't just jump over people. Um, so what
Yeah,
do you
there's a
have to?
different flow to the game. It is definitely like you can tell it's the same sport, but there is a different flow to it. And I mean, there's certainly athletic freaks in women's basketball too. Like
Oh,
you've got your
definitely.
grinders and you've got these people who are like, all right, there's not much you can do about that. But overall, yeah.
Yeah. So here's another opinion of mine, and I want your opinion of my opinion. Whenever I name the three greatest women's basketball players of all time, I always include Cynthia Cooper, and I feel like most people don't remember her. What do you think?
Yeah. I I understand that most people don't remember her. Anytime that you're like pre WNBA or early WNBA, and um, there's been such amazing players to come along since. The same stuff happens in men's basketball. Like there's
Right.
nobody under the age of 25 right now that cares at all about Magic Johnson or Larry Bird. Like they just don't. They're not putting them in the top five. They're just not doing it. They don't even care about Allen Iverson. They don't care about any of these dudes. They don't care. Era is really important. But I find specifically with women's basketball that players like Cynthia Cooper, like to me, it was so important that they mattered. It was so important that they were good and that they were trailblazers, that I love that you consider that, because there is what they were doing to be a high level basketball player in that era was so like, people give Michael Jordan credit for globalizing basketball, right? He gets all the credit in the world for globalizing the game. He became the biggest star in the world. Then I want you to give the same credit to the women who built women's basketball in this country. You want
Yes.
They get to be goats too, because it was not like the idea that women would be basketball stars was not a thing. It was not a thing. We had ice skaters, we had, gymnasts, we had a couple tennis players, but like basketball was a whole different thing. So I am 100% on board. Absolutely put Cynthia in there. I'm fine with making all three of your top three players from like pre 1990s. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care.
well, 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 my top three are Cynthia Cooper, Diana Taurasi, and Sue Bird. And I feel silly for not saying Candace Parker, but I'm not. But
Yeah. I don't know that I put Sue. I'm not going to put Sue in there. It's egregious, but I'm not putting Sue in there. But that's okay. It's okay.
well,
We can do.
that's my bias. I can admit it.
Sorry about that.
that's that's my bias because I really started watching women's college basketball when it was really all about Tennessee and UConn.
Yeah.
It was just about Tennessee and UConn. But as women's sports have grown, so have women in sports journalism like you. And I love it because when we look at men in sports, right, there's your journalists, right, going back to the old days like Chris Berman. And then a lot of these guys retire from the sport and then they end up on the desk.
Hmm.
And so we needed more of these women athletes on the desk talking about life from the woman
Yeah.
athlete perspective. And so it's inevitable as the sports grow, it's inevitable that the sports journalism grows for the women. And
Yeah.
I really feel like you may not feel like this, but I feel like you are so important in what you do in the grand scheme of things. And you even mentioned talking about setting the stage or the example for younger people. And I just feel like you have the kind of career that I'll say that young women look up to, but we're transitioning to a point where men and women can look at your career. There are men who love sports and love writing and love journalism who can look at you as an example.
Yeah.
And I want to know how you feel about that, but like owning that, like you're an example, not just for women, but for people who love sports and journalism.
Yeah. I think that I will say the one place I've always felt lucky is that I've had so much support in my personal life, like from high school, college, every college job I had, all the way until I really like achieved what I thought was, actually working in sports, having a full-time paid job, there were a lot of people who watched me work toward that and supported it and told me how talented I was and told me how good at this I was going to be. And many of them were men. In fact, most of them were men, because those were the sports fans in my life who were like, what you're doing is cool and you're going to be good at it. And so as my career went on, and I'd have people reach out to me for advice about certain things. I would have interns that I would bring up, and they'd be work underneath me. Most of them have been young men or other people that aren't women that I can mentor. And so I've just always understood that my ability to affect and influence younger generation has included both. I know that I want more young women to feel empowered to work in sports, and so I try to speak to those things and on their behalf. But I do genuinely feel like there are so many people, either people who want to work in the industry or just people who admire people in the industry, who see me as a sports journalist first. And that's something I'm just personally blessed with. And I think that like that support system and the just sort of unqualified belief from the people in my life before I entered into the industry played into that and has continued until now. I get people reach out to me all the time, boys, girls, or otherwise, whatever gender, that are interested in the industry, and they see my resume and they see what I'm capable of doing, and that's that. And I credit Gen Z for just being a much more progressive and open-minded generation in general, and credit to my generation, the millennials, for like paving some of that way. But there's just a lot of that. And so I appreciate your compliment, and that I should be looked at in that way across the board. And I do genuinely feel as though I am, at least from my peers and those younger than me. Can't speak for the people who are older than me, but for us, for the millennials and Gen Z and the people who I either came up with, were alongside, or have come up behind me, I think it's wonderful. And I never feel like I have to speak for just my gender or just one specific role that I play in media.
I love that. I love you saying that. And I can attest to that based on a lot of the things that you've posted beyond sports, where I can see that you are an inclusive person. And I say that, I use those words intentionally because it takes effort to be inclusive. And so you don't speak up just for yourself, but you have clearly demonstrated an issue with bullies, with racists, with sexists. And so supporting people and being inclusive is a part of who you are. And that's one reason why I was glad to have you here, because I've seen just from your posts that you're so much more than just sports knowledge. I've seen some other people that I admire, men and women, who will get on another show, another platform, and they say some things, and I think, wow, I didn't know you were like that. We don't share values.
Right, right.
Um, so you've always been inclusive, and I love that about you. And one thing, I'm going to switch gears again. I've done this a lot. I feel like I'm all over the place.
No
Um,
worries.
but when we talk about sports, one thing we often don't talk about, because some people say it's not a real sport,
Sorry.
is a WWE.
Ah, I love WWE so much. Okay, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So before I ask you this question, I'm gonna put your contact info here, because if anyone else wants to reach out to you, they definitely should. They should follow you. They should follow your contacts. I mean, follow
Yes.
your accounts, because you put out so much quality content, mostly about sports, but more about life as well. I love that. And every now and then you put out something about wrestling. And
Yes.
so my question for you is, it's not even my opinion, it's my question for you. Who is better? The Rock, Triple H, or Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I love it. I love it. I would say The Rock. But
I mean, better. Obviously, in terms of like to be like who I enjoy watching the most. Like you can only watch one guy's matches for the rest of your life, right? I'm going to pick Stone Cold. Um, like there's all different ways that you can qualify it
yeah,
as a
right.
wrestler, as a performer, yeah, as a cutting promos. Like there's different ways to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
The Rock is like an all-time promo guy. Like, I mean, he's got some of the most
Yeah.
iconic like finishing moves, but like nothing's better than the stunner. I'm sorry. There's nothing that anyone does that's better than a
Stone
stunner.
Cold
It is
Stunner.
simple, it is beautiful, and everybody can do it.
Yeah. Well, the difference between the two, in my opinion, is The Rock was a lot more entertaining, and Stone Cold was a lot more relatable. You could
Okay.
see,
Okay. I can
yeah,
see
you could
that.
see yourself in Stone Cold,
Yeah, you could hang out with Stone Cold, like The Rock's like on another level. Yeah.
right? And with Stone Cold, one thing I love about him, and I've seen this in some videos with him too, is his values align with ours. People have these stereotypes of this country guy, whatever, but Stone Cold is also inclusive, and
Yeah.
he's a very intelligent guy, and I love that about him, that he doesn't allow his character to be stuffed in this little box. So okay, you're this country guy, whatever, you're supposed to be this or be that. No, he's a man with values and standards, and I
Yeah.
love that. um
He also
and I saw
hasn't fully abandoned WWE the way The Rock apparently has. So let's see. Like, come on, Rock. Show up and prove me wrong. For the love of God.
well, because he doesn't relate the same way. Stone Cold
No.
will always be relatable.
Like John
Like,
Cena, in a lot of ways, this is the same way. Like, I always give John Cena so much more credit as somebody who went off and had another career, because it's like he will never not be there for his wrestling fans. And I find that so charming and so like how can you not, as a person who watches guys fake fight on TV, not love the guy who wants to come back every time and make sure that he's there for you? Like, he's our comfort blanket. If you don't like John Cena in 2023, there's something wrong with you.
okay, I like John Cena. Not gonna call him my comfort blanket.
Oh, come on. You don't get excited when you hear that? You don't get excited when you hear that music?
It's so just like hockey and baseball. You love wrestling more than me.
Okay, fair enough.
That-
I love
that's why you just
anything. If people are moving and they've got uniforms on, I'm losing my mind over it. Yeah.
see. I love that, and because that's about following your passion. There's so many people who do things. They're not following their passion, but they are paying their bills. And there's this idea that people in sports are making so much money, but there's so many roles that we don't see, right?
Oh yeah.
Not everyone is getting the Deshaun Watson contract. There are
No.
people behind the scenes who have more morals and standards, but don't have that paycheck. And
Yeah.
I just want to say I appreciate you. We're gonna close out here in the next couple minutes. I appreciate you being here so much. There's so much about you. If you did not come on the show, I could talk about you for an hour, about the way that you, even on Twitter, when we're talking about Cam Newton, and you were able to tell who was making comments on his football skill set or whose judgments were based on other factors.
Yeah.
And and there are times where it was obvious,
Yeah.
but you're always your real self. You're always authentic. I can search you all across all social media, and I don't believe I'll find a single video of you being fake.
That's a high compliment. I really genuinely do take that as the highest possible compliment in this day and age of social media. It's something I really try to always remember, that like no matter what I'm doing on social media, that like if I am myself, then I don't have any regrets. Doesn't mean I don't make
Yes.
mistakes, doesn't mean I don't say things that I have to apologize for or take back, but that in general I'm presenting a version of myself that you would meet in real life. And so I really genuinely appreciate that compliment.
Mm. So, in the last couple minutes here, do you have any last words that you would like to give young people, maybe in high school, who love sports and love writing?
Well, first of all, I would love if people in high school loved sports. It feels like we are in as an industry maybe failing to pull in the younger generation the way that we have in the past. Everything is so niche and super diverse, and I think like we have to figure out a way to reach younger kids with sports. It's not the, it's not the ubiquitous sort of role in younger people's lives as it was in ours, in
Right.
my generation and in yours and everybody older than us. It's a little bit different. So if you love sports, first of all, great, because I think it's a great time to get into the industry at your age because it's a little more niche. These jobs are a little bit more diversified, even if things are changing. Um, the advice I give at this stage to everyone is don't have an expectation for how this is going to go. When you come into sports media, a lot of times you take the avenue that you can get in. Maybe you want to be a writer but you end up in a newsroom. Maybe you want to be a producer but you end up at doing digital media or doing social media or whatever else. Whatever in you can get in. Because again, if you don't love it enough to take that in, I'm not saying that you don't deserve a job. I'm not saying that you don't have to pay your dues. I'm saying if you don't love it enough to take the first in that you can get and work through that channel, eventually you are going to fizzle out because the whole the whole journey of being in sports media is an exercise in how much do you love this before you feel like you want to quit and just go be a teacher or something else. We've all been there. If you like don't have to worry if you've questioned it. You don't have to think that you are not worthwhile of a job in this industry. If you have doubts, we all have them, but make sure you love it enough that you will take the opportunities in front of you and make what you can out of that and forge your path. Be willing to learn and be aware of the fact that every single thing you think about, about this industry today in 2023 will be different by 2024 and will look entirely completely inconceivably different, almost unrecognizable in the next 6 to 7 years. That is the way that media works. And so take what you learned in college, get yourself into a job, do as much as you can, and then throw everything else away and learn on the job because that's what's going to be the real future of your industry is how well you learn every single day on the job and how you adapt as the industry changes because it changes faster and faster every single year.
I love it. I love that's a so much great advice in about 2 minutes. But really, what you said was the integration of your love for sports, taking advantage of opportunities, and managing expectations.
Mhm.
And you
Absolutely.
have to love it enough to do those things.
That's
And
right.
and that's what you're all about. You said in the very beginning you love sports, you love writing, and you love journalism, and you knew you had to do it. And that love and that work ethic is what made it inevitable for you. So I'm so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. You're the
Yeah.
best. I'm grateful for you. And with that, I'm
Thank
going
you
to
so
close up
much.
the show. And so with that, I'll say good night and thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Charleston.